In this short class, I'll show you how to create small loopable animation and render it with Redshift. We'll cover up techniques that allow us to build simple animation without crossing elements, set up the materials using base presets, and we'll look into settings optimization to get clear noise-free render. And now on the screen you'll see the result you'll get in the end of this class. So let's start. Let's start to build our composition. We'll start from the torus, maybe a thin torus, 10. Let's duplicate, rotate, set it maybe to 150, add extra thick, move this thing to the outside, create null, and move it to the center of our element. So this is our side. We need to set the animation. It's very easy. I'm going to S, key interpolation, mode, project, key interpolation linear, find the proper value, 360, and we have some stop in night frame, so we can go and remove this frame. Yes, it works great. Duplicate, and now we have crossing, and there are a few variants how to manage this thing. I go to animation, show track, go to rotation B, showing this line, going to constant, offset repeat, and extend this. So we have to see our range preview and this black line that goes and repeat our elements animation. I think it works quite well, and I'll duplicate this element, going to animation, where our second frame, and move this thing maybe to 30 frames, and duplicate one more. Don't break the selection, so if we extend this thing, you'll see that our all keyframes are selected, and move it to 60. Now I can go back to 89, and now we have loop animation. Now when the base is ready, we'll have to continue our work with building and finishing the scene. For me, it's much easier to build the scene after I find proper composition. So let's start, but before I select torus and raise the segment here and maybe here, just to have smooth geometry. Then I'll build maybe some basic shapes, and I think 300 radial, 200 to the bottom, and I'll have to be sure so I don't have crossing with torus. For example, like this. And have enough height. Now it's not enough. I put it to null, LG, so to be able to manage this thing further. Like this, maybe cylinder, like this, cross, up rotation segments, height, maybe 220. I like round digits. It's quite basic. Now I'll create camera, going to isometric. I like isometric, and I think Instagram likes isometric. Set maybe to not higher resolution. And now I face the problem that our elements are not very visible. So I keep this camera here, duplicate, just to check, go to maybe perspective, set to portrait, and try to find another angle for our composition. For example, like something like this maybe. Not perfectly isometric, but we don't have much clipping of our rings, just to see here. So we can of course set like this, or maybe this will work. So maybe 135 millimeters, almost as I want. Yes, like this. And I need a background, so I'll create maybe cylinder with no caps, sliced. I'll rotate to 90 degrees or 100, or like this. For background, going to Shift V, going to U, and up this tinted border color, just to be sure everything is black that is out of our frame. Let's check this kind of look. This is not good because we have very frontal view of our segment, of our circle, and it not clearly visible. Let me find the angle. Pretty nice. And now I can add some details. Let me go and set to bottom. I use LG for grouping this thing. Going to cylinder, go into caps. Not caps, but fillet. Shrink down radius maybe to 5. Extend radius. Oh, I keep radius the same, and I duplicate another cylinder. After I made this cylinder inside the null, I can make a lot of spheres inside. Move them to the bottom and move it to the top. And minus 175, just to be very precise. It doesn't work well because we need to up some spheres to this level. Let's check the bottom. And I'd like to add some extra detail. I going duplicate this cloner. I delete everything. Let me close this thing, except bottom spheres. Select this cylinder, going with Alt to Boolean, and cut off our spheres. And I extend the radius a bit, just a bit. Now in cylinder, in caps, I add the segments, so we have lower effect of our boolean. Create single object, hide new edges, and then going to our cloner, and on it. Now we don't see the gap, but it's here, and I think it adds some details to our scene. After everything is built up, we can go and set the lighting. So, small tweaks. In Boolean, we're going to up our segments just to have clear our edges. You'll see. And we go and select our spheres, up segments, and now I think we can start to work with materials. This lesson is more about animation, so we'll use some preset in Redshift that helps us to work with our geometry. I'll create some metal. I use copper, for example. Let's rename copper, gold. So just using the presets, and just plastic. We use plastic, for example, just white for now. What I want to use this cloner ring with gold. Another element with copper. Let's use LG for copper. I use one material for them. Add for gold extra roughness. For copper maybe add some more. Yes, kind of like this. And another elements I'll put to plastic. White, but not white, maybe this bright blue with some roughness here, and with no roughness, maybe dark blue for the back. Let's check our gamma. Oh, not good. Let's pick up this color and just this works much better for me. I create some area light, for example at the top. I add some brute force just to have some light bounce, just one. Put it to the top. Yes, we have this smooth light. 10. Yes, that's what I want to have. Lock render to camera 1. Create some more lights. At the side here. Extend radius of our element, our background element, maybe so it cover our light at side 1. Let's add some hue just to see where it strike at the left. Set back to white, maybe 2. We have this specular here, maybe 3. Going and create opposite light. Maybe a bit bigger at the top. Side 2, maybe a bit closer. I want to have different light strength with sides, so the left I want to be more brighter. Maybe 5. Let's increase. Now I think it looks much better, but now we don't see pretty much difference between gold and copper. Let's go and check, for example, silver preset. Not good. Aluminium. Yes, add some roughness. If we up roughness to a very high, we don't see and we lose the metallic look of our ring. So I want to find something in between, maybe like this. And we have this very strength speculoos. We'll fix it later. So now I think it works. Add one more dark blue element. Apply. Here we go to aluminium. Let me play with roughness here. You'll see it's not metal, but it's very dark. And I think in between should work well. Now we have beautiful rotation with our geometry not intersecting, and I think not intersecting at the bottom. So let's name it to BG. Background. Let's face our problem with specular and try to fix with redshift camera. We're going to exposure, enabled, and here we have this allow exposure slider. If we set it to very low, we'll see that this white goes and set to not so bright. But now I want to find what area light brings that thing, and this is area light at the top. And we can go to ray switch and try to lower the glossy. You'll see that if we lower this thing, it almost disappears when 0. So we now can remove this tag and play with this glossy slider. That's why I love redshift, because you can tune very subtle and very gentle every element. Maybe let's add some hue to the left and small, maybe warmish to the right. Let's go to the next chapter to find proper sampling for this scene and maybe render it out. To find proper sampling, we're going to the samples mode, going to system and set bucket render maybe to 64 just to have faster updating of IPR. And let's start from our settings. I'll set this to 4/128, brute force up to 520. This is the basic setup, so I usually use this for my settings for maybe socials. Now I go into optimization. We don't have refraction, transparency. If you use not redshift of version 3 point and etc., you'll have to lower the just refraction. You don't have the transparency. So like this, because we have only 1 or 2 maybe reflection and we don't need to waste our GPU to calculate additional reflections. Now we go to our lights, into the samples in array light and set maybe to 1024. The key of our settings is to remove all these white areas. We need to have these gray areas. So now the white shows that there are a lot of samples going here. So maybe we can try to go into materials. We have GGX. This is a slow animation. If you have powerful GPU, you can keep like this. I'll go and set to Beckman. Let me show you what it brings to you. So Beckman, we have a different another reflection, and you can play with this to have better optimization. But now I can stick with GDX. Going back to our samples, we'll see that we have here a lot of white zone, and I think this is reflection. We go into reflection and set to 1024. You'll see that everything goes to gray value. So up a bit. Almost perfect. So of course you can up and up these settings a bit higher, but it takes a lot of time to render. So now at 4 seconds I'll keep with basic setup, and in 2 seconds I'll up maybe to 1000. Doesn't affect much to render time, so we can render this thing and we'll check our noise level. I think nice. Here we have some noisy reflection because of higher roughness, so I up a bit. Doesn't affect much. I keep maybe 2000 and lower our adaptive error threshold. 3 seconds. Let's check our samples. We don't have white areas almost. I think these settings doesn't require a lot of render time. I use 2 cards with 2080 Ti, and I think you can have some much more time in render. If so, you can lower the samples twice. So you'll see that if we set to 1024, it brings us almost in 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Multiply by 2, 3 seconds. And don't forget to set big bucket size. Sometimes it improves render time. Everything is ready here and our samples is ready, so we can render this thing out. I almost hit render button and I found that our rings could not work this way because they will fall down. We have to move this thing above this ring, and of course this should be done before render and before cloning, but we have quite procedural setting, so we can tweak this thing very fast way. I think 130. Let's go to the first frame, zoom in, and just move this thing here. As we have everything in null object, we don't lose our animation, and our animation is set to null object, and now we have good rotation. I want to add some flakes, so I create new material with preset silver, shrink down, lower the roughness. I'll create C4D shader, noise, texture, raise the resolution, connect to texture, to surface. Doesn't work well now. Go to another, maybe this kind of setup, work much better. Raise up contrast, I think to maximum. I want to have only black and white stripes. It takes a lot of time to recalculate. Yes, kind of like this. 20. Waiting for progressive rendering. For better responding. Now we have low clip to cut these elements. I don't want to have so much white elements, and I set this to maybe cubic. 40, low clip. Yes, very subtle effect. Now we'll take material blender and blend our materials. Base layer, layer 1, layer 1 blend. And we'll get these white and dark zones. Now I up a bit scale, maybe to 80, just to have much elements here, and shrink down low clip. And now we can render this thing out. I found out that we have very linear animation, and we can improve this thing by adding some acceleration. For me it's easier to work with single elements, so I Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and we'll go to the first frame. I'll G to new element, going to S object, show F curve, select these points with Ctrl A, going to easy, up our tangents to each other, so it's like slow down and fast falling. And I create null, and I now can rotate this thing to -90 degrees. And I think it's more realistic than it was, and we can work with this thing in our scene. Going to our composition, I delete these three, Ctrl V, move it to clone a ring, check. I think it's quite nice. I duplicate, middle mouse click, just to have our animation, extend it maybe to 30 frames, duplicate, middle mouse click, move it to 60 frames. So we'll have this proper offsetting of frames. 60, 89. So let's check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And this is pretty simple, and I think this is more realistic than we have in previous version. Of course it have to fall down because it can't stick with this circle, but for animation I think this works much better than animation with linear keyframes. Now, that's all I want to share with you, and thank you for watching this video.